All right, welcome everybody to the first public appearance of Jono and Dan at Living Systems. I'm Jono. Today we're going to have a discussion about what Living Systems is and why Dan and I started it. And we're going to introduce each other. And then we're going to do a segment on frequently asked questions that both of us encounter and that are frequently asked out there in the agricultural community, particularly in this case around regenerative agriculture. So I'll start by introducing myself. My name's Jono Frew. For those of you that don't know me, I am a regenerative agriculture coach and enabler. I operate from a company called Natural Performance Limited, and I also am involved with a diverse species seed company called Symbiosis Ag Limited, and I'm also a board member of Quorum Sense, which is a regenerative agriculture platform in New Zealand. I'd like to hand it over to you, Dan, to introduce yourself, please.
Thanks, Jono. And yeah, welcome everyone to this conversation about our Living Systems platform that Jono and I are bringing into the world. So my name is Dan Regtien. I am a farm planning consultant in Palmerston North at the moment. So I started my business, it's called Recon Ag. I started my business in September of last year, and what I do with that is help farmers to plan their progress in the direction that they want to head. And I'm really, really passionate about regenerative agriculture and all of the topics that we're going to talk about today. So without further ado, let's do it.
Yeah, man. And I think, it was only a matter of time that Dan and I should link up. We started talking on social media some time ago. I remember Dan was still, you're working for a local council, weren't you? Is that right, Dan? You're sort of land management?
That's right, yeah, land management advisor for Horizons Regional Council.
Yep, and was really keen to bite off a bit more and get out there in the world. And now, having done that, created his business Recon Ag, and stepping out of that role and doing his thing, which he clearly is just so passionate about. And that's what drew me to Dan in the first place through our conversations. And then we only met up in person through the RA20 tour that Peter Barrett and I held last year, that Dan came along to one of our events for. And then recently at a conference in Masterton, Dan and I linked up, and through coffee and a bit of a breakfast, we decided that we would sort of continue the conversation a bit more, and that our interests were just so well aligned, not only in what each of us are doing and committed to in the space of helping farmers in New Zealand, but also, similar stage in life with children and also music. Dan and I both really keen on music, and it just seemed to make sense that there was something there that we needed to, explore, didn't we?
Yeah, yep. And I do credit you in part to me going out on my own in business, but we won't go into that story just now.
Yeah, we'll call it a gentle kick in the ass. Yeah.
All right.
Well, let's talk, Dan. Let's talk to these people about these people. Let's talk to the people watching this video about what Living Systems is.
All right. Well, Living Systems happened quite organically, as you started to introduce, when we met up in Masterton and had a conversation over breakfast. We just really felt like we wanted to continue the conversation and do something. Something was brewing in our conversation, so we did that, and kind of wasn't intentional for a platform for engagement of farmers and community at all. It just spontaneously kind of emerged, which is great. I mean, it's a really nice beginning for something to happen like that. But what it is that it's a community for engaging farmers with each other and communities. And when we were having these conversations, I drew some circles. Do you remember the circles, Jono?
I remember the circles, man.
I've got them here.
No way.
Yeah, I won't make it any closer or any longer, but it was because I knew there was something really important that we were getting to, and I couldn't put my finger on it, so I drew some circles. There were
Well,
four.
let's talk about the what the circle. I mean, let's not go into detail about the where the circles merge, but I think those circles are really, crucial. It
Yeah,
sort of captures, the areas we want to impact.
yeah, and you asked me a question. You said, "What are you wanting to get out of this that we're doing together? What are you wanting to get out of it?" And so I drew um, four blocks: technology, environment, people, and regenerative principles. And then all of those four blocks overlapped. And so where the circles overlapped, I just wrote what connects those two things: technology and regenerative, environmental and technology, people and environmental, and all of the overlaps in the circle, I just kept writing. And my thoughts kind of converged and started to make sense. And in the middle, I wrote living agriculture. And then when we spoke next, I told you that it says living agriculture. And then, yeah, so you take it from there.
Yeah, and then I sort of felt like we didn't want to limit ourselves to just agriculture, and so with just a slight, Dan and I actually had a conversation earlier today about the power of words and language, and just with the subtle changing of agriculture to systems, because everything is just so interrelated and interconnected. To have agriculture as a separate sort of industry, really this is all just a wider functioning, intimately connected ecosystem. And so we just went with living systems. And from there, I mean, Dan has got a very different background to me, especially around technology. That's definitely not been an area of my strengths. But Dan, having a bit more nous and skills in that area, came forward with this platform. He said to me about this platform that had no ads, and it was like a social media platform where you could share everything, but it was fully secure. There were no algorithms, and but the only thing is we would have to pay for it. And he introduced me to Mighty Networks, and we created a mighty network together called Living Systems, where the central community or hub is all free to access, and is the sharing of what people are experiencing, what their learnings are, and what we would share, as well as things that we're learning and discovering. We all share on that central sort of platform. But more, and as we share, everything is categorized. So the cool thing about these mighty networks is that the stuff that you share, and I'm just learning about this, we only created this 2 weeks ago, was it, Dan? Not even that. Mm-hmm. And me being the slow technological learner, I'm just getting the ropes, just the hang of the ropes now. But when you post something up, it has to be put into a category. Is that correct, Dan?
Yeah, it puts it into topics.
Topics.
Yeah.
And so when we then come back to say we're interested in a certain topic, like someone comes in new to the community, we're sort of calling it like the Mycelial Network. So the hub of the Living Systems network is just a mycelial network linking plants together, which the plants are the participants, the members of the group. And so everyone's sharing, everyone's contributing, but we store that information in certain topics, so that anyone new to the conversation need not miss out on prior discussions. They can simply go and look at certain topics that are relevant to them and what they're dealing with, and they can just look up historic posts, any information, any links. And the other really cool thing about the Mighty Networks platforms are we can offer courses for more structured and more in-depth teaching on categories of interest to people. And again, these courses would be, selected by the person who was interested in learning, and they would be able to then choose their own criteria and their own levels of detail. So, catering to everyone from right at the beginning of the journey to people who are really up there high and well advanced in their understanding of ecological function and the principles and practical applications of regenerative agriculture. So it was a network, but it was a little more than that, wasn't it, Dan?
Absolutely, yeah. And like you said, we spoke earlier about the network being a mycelial network, and that really made sense because, yeah, it's a way to share nutrients. It's a thing that connects farmers who are engaging in the same types of activities and also other supporting people wanting to contribute to the community, and they can do so through a network. And it's a mycelial network, and that's what living systems it's a great metaphor for living systems.
And we created a little tagline which seems to land quite well. I'm particularly proud of it. We went with thriving soils, growing communities, and I just think that's just sums it up to a T for me. So as part of this sort of introductory video, and we are really just working this whole thing out as we go. We've got some underlying principles which we're both clear on. Something that we discovered today, which we find really, really powerful, is through having these more in-depth conversations, we've been able to identify that our thoughts aren't perfectly identical. We don't agree on the same things, and there's certainly a lot of things we do agree on, and there's a lot of things that we have different perspectives on. And we think that's really powerful to be able to harness that diversity of perspective and not make it bad or wrong, and in fact use it to be able to develop perspective, outside of the whether we agree on something or not, like not letting it hold us up. And this sort of segues perfectly into the next section of the interview this morning, is talking about the frequently asked questions that we've each encountered. And we thought what we'd do is we'd just roll through a bunch of questions which we both find to be frequently asked, and we would both each answer them. And for me, and I know for Dan, in our conversation earlier, when we started to sort of talk about these questions and what we were both experiencing out there in the community, was when we started to both share authentically about what was there for us on each of these subjects, we really got that we both had quite different perspectives on a lot of these subjects, some quite similar, but some quite different. And I remember watching Dan's face sort of, he lit up, Dan really lit up. And when I'd stopped sharing, Dan said to me, why don't you talk about that, Dan? When you realize that, we're able to work together with these different perspectives, what was there for you? Because I could tell you were really moved by what you had discovered.
Yeah, I guess for me, it was great to know that we didn't agree on everything, because it's too easy to get into that zone of, oh yes, I agree with you, Jono. Let's keep going on about all the stuff that we agree with, and it's so cool, and we both know what's right for everyone, and that's great for a while. But what really got me lit up was when you said, no, I don't think we should define regenerative agriculture. And I was after a conversation last night, I was actually more galvanized in my ideas that yes, we must define regenerative agriculture. So, but that sort of conflict, but it's a helpful sort of conflict, is the one that really gets learning.
Yeah, and it wasn't even a conflict, was it, man? It was like we heard each other out, and there was no righteousness in what each of us were sharing. We were like embracing the fact that our perspectives are so different. And then we left with like, there's no, what do you call it? I'm trying to think of the word. There's no friction, like here's one perspective, here's another. They can both exist. You don't need to choose one or the other. And Dan and I realized that that's actually a really powerful way to move forward as communities, is to allow for other perspectives and not make it wrong, not stand there saying you either agree or disagree with it, allowing people to express whatever's there for them, and then acknowledging that person for what they've shared, because whether you can see it at the time or not, it is always a contribution to those that are listening.
Mm-hmm.
And then just coming in with what you have to say, minus needing to defend your stance or needing to dominate what the other person has said and make them wrong. It's just like, okay, let's, accept that. And now let's share our perspective. And we just decided that, that there's a really powerful foundation of any sort of, network, any sort of community.
Yes. So with that, should we start with the first question?
Yeah, man. Who do you want to start? You want to ask? Yep. You want to hit me with it?
So, Jono, what is regenerative agriculture?
Oh man, what is regenerative agriculture? So for me, regenerative agriculture is no one thing. It is no thing that is definable in the sense of a definition. It is, to me, an umbrella. I look at it like an umbrella that is housing a whole lot of techniques and methodologies and philosophy, of which it is up to the individual who is perhaps managing an operation or who owns an operation to do with soil and growing food, to choose from that whatever tools are going to move their farm ecosystem forward in a self-perpetuating manner using natural cycles. So using tools that lie underneath that, let's look at some of them. So, minimal disturbance. We've got increased diversity, both plant, animal, microbial, increasing diversity. And we've got have a living root in the soil at all times. These are some basic, and you guys all know the rest who are, following this space. They're just the basics, but then we start to dive into some of the philosophies and some of the practices, some of which are contradictory, but again, like the conversation we just had, to me, they're all tools that are available to everyone, and it is up to the individual to choose which of those tools are applicable to their farm. And so it's not a prescription, it's not a one size fits all thing. And with that is it can be quite confronting for some people to not necessarily know the exact path to take. But also it's also incredibly freeing and incredibly empowering to know that you can choose whichever direction you would like to go in at any time. And that gives you some space to allow for a lot of the unpredictable things that come and approach us as farmers, like climate, weather, market fluctuations, all these things. Not having a specific routine or a specific recipe to follow gives you some real freedom and power. So for me, it's a bunch of tools that you can use any of at any time, whatever suits you, as long as it's moving your farm forward ecologically.
Yeah, I really appreciate that perspective.
Thanks, man. What about you, Dan? What to you is regenerative agriculture?
To me, regenerative agriculture is defined by two definitions that have come to me. One only recently last night, and one a while ago. So I'll start with the one that I've been sitting with for a while, and it is by Charles Massey, the author of Call of the Reed Warbler by Charles Massey, an Australian farmer. His definition goes something like, regenerative agriculture is a type of agriculture that is socially enhancing and ecologically enhancing. So that's it for that one, and that one is really strongly resonant with me, and I could live with that one. But in addition to that, what goes into a bit more detail and complexity is Shane Ward's definition that I heard last night. And this is what it is. Regenerative agriculture is the design and management of productive land use through mimicry of diverse natural ecosystems that harnesses and restores ecological function to produce food fiber and fuel, informed by observation of informed by observation and continual adjustment to feedback. So there's a lot in that, and it's a very complex definition for a very complex subject. And
He's done it very well though, man. Like it's nice and concise, but it allows for a whole lot more. You know, it allows for like both of those are just beautiful. Something certainly a lot more concise than mine, and probably a lot more descriptive. You know, mine was very broad, but just beautiful, beautiful definitions of something that's not limiting.
Yeah, and I really like the last word of Shane's definition, feedback. So it kind of, in that last word, it says that it's going to change.
Yeah, and you've got to be listening for it.
Yep.
Beautiful, man.
And I would just add to that the reason why I believe it should be defined, and it is important that it's defined. I know you don't like the word should, but I do feel like regenerative agriculture has got so much energy and so much potential to produce so much positive outcome on farm, in land management, and in communities, that it's important that it doesn't get sidetracked or derailed or taken advantage of by this tendency for it to be a blurry subject, because as soon as it's blurry, there's nothing to sort of grab onto, and I feel like you're more likely to be sidetracked or distracted by something that's related but not actually regenerative agriculture. And yeah, so that's why I believe it really needs to have a definition or a set of definitions around it.
And maybe that's something we work on, Dan, something that fits, you know, our perspective, something that I mean, I think what Charles and Shane said were just very, very, you know, well written descriptions, and I can definitely see there's a place for it. It's when it's describable, it's easy to grab and use, isn't it? And stay focused on.
Yeah.
So no, I really like it, man, and I'm really enjoying this dialogue. All right, I'm going to hit you with one, Dan. You ready?
Yep.
All right. So does it cost to transition to regenerative agriculture? And as a sub question to that, does it reduce profitability?
Yeah, well, that's a hard question, and that's one that comes up a lot, and it's an understandable one. And farms are businesses, so they want to know whether it's going to have a cost, a capital outlay, and what's the return on that cost, if there is a cost to doing it. I would say that it's going to be different for every farmer and every farm. So it's really impossible to answer, but I would kind of, I would talk a little bit about what it is, what sort of outcomes are you wanting to achieve? So whoever's asking this question about the cost and the profitability, what is it that you're trying to achieve? So the cost is one thing. I'll just put that to a side for now. But I asked a question to the Manawatu Regenerative Agriculture Group last week, and it was, what's your why? Why are you here? Why are you interested in regenerative agriculture? And one thing that came up quite often around the table was the feel-good factor. So a lot of them suggested that there was something about it that just felt good. And so, yeah, the cost is one thing and the profitability is one thing, and it's certainly important to businesses. But it's also just as important to acknowledge that feel good factor and what feels right, what gives you joy, and yeah, why do you get up in the morning is an important related concept. What about you, Jono?
Yeah, man. No, I love where that was going. It's like, what is your measure of success? Probably a discussion for another day. You and I could spend a bit of time on this. So for me, does it cost to transition to regenerative agriculture? I'll talk to that one first. To me, no. The short answer for me is no. It doesn't cost. There are certain things that as farmers we spend money on, and for me, one of the easiest and lowest risk ways of transitioning a system is making use of opportunities as they arise within the already existing system. So, for instance, if we're talking about diversifying our pastures or perhaps growing diverse species summer or winter feed crops, it would just be a case of looking at the opportunities for that, whether it be regrassing or like I said, winter or summer feed planting. We would then look at just simply taking a portion of what we would normally be spending on the establishment of those crops and its management. So the fertilizer applications, both pre and post emergence, we would then simply take that spending, spend a fraction of it on seed and planting, and then the rest is all just the short answer to that paradigm or that scenario of simply planting diverse pastures is we take the money normally spent on FERT, leave it in the bank. I'm not saying don't spend any money on FERT, and it depends on the context. Like you said, Dan, it's very context specific. But for me, it's about taking advantage of opportunities and taking money that would normally be spent on things that are holding our system back, like high analysis fertilizers and excessive herbicide and insecticide use, etc., and creating a system that's not complicated, encourages diversity and for our plants to work with the soil biology, and that, like I said, it costs a fraction of what you would normally be spending on monoculture crops. I've got some cool stats from one of my clients this week he was spending $1,200 per hectare on Swedes that's grown from planting, preparation and management, and then his fodder beet costs were $2,200, which is actually really modest per hectare for fodder beet. What he spent on diverse species winter feed this year was $430. So substantially less spending and getting more outcomes. So not only just with the initial grazing, but from regrowth and new germination of dropped seed that is grown through that time period. So it doesn't cost money. A change in your thinking and a change in your perspective, going from treating symptoms to actually preventing the symptoms from actually perpetuating by the systems that we create. They need not be expensive. And if you just look at the amount of money we're sending to town at the moment, like I'll quote Ian Mitchell-Winnis there, just we don't think twice about sending a lot of money to town, and there's a lot of fertilizer inputs and a lot of chemistry we spend money on, a lot of which at a detriment to our soil. It's simply stopping the harmful stuff and spending it on the good stuff. When it comes to profitability, same thing. If you're not profitable, you're not regenerative. It's a really important part of the social aspect of regenerative agriculture is you must be profitable. And with less reliance on inputs and more resilience around climatic stresses that are out of our control, very quickly, that starts to pay dividends. So you don't need to drop profitability. In fact, what I find is, and this is another really important part of the whole regenerative mindset, is you do need to want it to work. And once people really establish that, okay, I'm going to make this work, all of the resources, all of the information just comes forward. And when it's applied from a space of wanting it to work, I find every time people are able to make substantial increases in their profits, even in the first year. I've also noticed in my sharing this afternoon, Dan, that I talk a lot.
You're good
And
at it.
yeah. Well, it's probably a lot of ramble, but hopefully it's got some substance and it's resonating to some people out there.
I'm sure it is. Is it my turn to ask a question?
Yeah, man, it is. We've both done the profitability thing.
Okay. So, Jono, is regenerative agriculture just organics?
Yeah, it's a commonly asked one, that one. And the short answer is no, it is not. Like I said, all the tools are available with regenerative agriculture. The thing that I really like about keeping it as an open conversation, this regenerative thing, is it doesn't create division, and saying you're either regenerative or not, or let's say conventional versus regenerative, all these, versus conversations. That's where organics was quite limiting. Was it because organics is like, right, okay, no chemicals, even though if you're under a certain, there's quite a few loopholes in the certification of organics, certainly in New Zealand, where you're allowed to use chemicals, which is crazy. But generally, as a standard practice of organics, is you don't use chemicals, and with regenerative, you've got access to using anything you like, including chemicals. So it's not organic, but it's really just about being mindful of each choice that you make. You're encompassing the whole in that choice, and you're understanding each of the effects of that choice that you're making. So it's not just here's the deficiency, let's add this product, regardless of the unintended consequences of that choice. It's it allows you to be able to do different things, including things that land under the conventional, organic, all the different things. So it's not organic, definitely not organic.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, it's not organic. Um, Although there are some overlaps. Obviously, some of the philosophy of organic agriculture really aligns well with some of the philosophy of regenerative agriculture. Where it differs the most is in having a set of rules. Regenerative agriculture has principles, but even those are flexible, and you can take them or leave them, and it's more of a overall mindset kind of thing. But all of the tools are available, and actually they're more available. Use whatever you need to in order to make the farm more ecologically enhancing and socially enhancing, to use that definition. And yeah, so the rules of organic agriculture don't apply, and in some ways that is difficult to understand, and it's difficult for marketers to use the term regenerative agriculture if you can't say this is bottom lines, and because it can't be marketed if it can't be really regulated. But that's sort of just the answer, isn't it?
And I think what's really exciting, just to sort of add to that, is there's a lot of change in the industry coming from big leaders like NZ Merino, for instance, coming in with ways to benchmark and monitor people's trends regarding their regenerative journey, and it's not clean cut. It's not, there's a I've seen a diagram when I was last in at New Zealand Merino of the different aspects and the different levels in each of these aspects that farmers would meet, and so at a glance you can see sort of where the farm's at, but it takes into account the whole picture, from social economics to environment to personal development to profitability to inline product worth and value, basic soil function. It's really a complex picture, but done in a real simple way. I think that's really exciting. So organics, its whole thing was, just we don't use use chemicals, and therefore our food's going to be, better off. But what was missing, that's sort of, I like how when you were saying to me, Dan, when we first met, you were talking about a little less, what was it, like woe, when you were talking about how a lot of conversation is all sort of woe, like what not to do, whereas regenerative is sort of like it's opportunity, it's all these things you can do to move your system forward, whereas organics are sort of like, no, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. And a lot of people slipped into the trap of organics by substitute. So taking away, for instance, the chemical fungicides and using copper sulfate. Well, that hasn't worked super well, although it does act as an antifungal agent. It's also sterilizing the soil environment. So little things like that. And the other thing, when we're talking about treating symptoms and stepping out of that paradigm into creating resilience, when we're talking about, earlier today, we talked about how easy it is to get the answer, to get the solution. And it often comes in a can or a bottle in the current system. It's like, here, apply this, you're going to kill all your, insects that are eating your crop. Well, that's, firstly, it's really appealing to a farmer because it's to them as a form of protection. And what we don't often realize, and what's not told to us by the people selling us these answers, is that it's, actually taking out thousands and thousands of your beneficial, organisms that are going to keep you from being susceptible to the one thing you're trying to kill. And it is a challenging mindset. And I don't know if there's any easy way around it, Dan, other than just sort of, embracing the sheer complexity of the systems that we're working with.
Well, perhaps an easy way around it is to develop those connections with others that are doing it, because you don't need to know everything. And there are people out there more than willing to share their experiences and advice, and that's just what Living Systems does.
Exactly, man. Well put. All right, let's go on to the next question. Yeah, my turn?
Yep.
My turn. Okay, Dan, aren't we already doing regenerative agriculture in New Zealand?
Well, firstly, no.
Do you like how I said with real conviction then, are we really doing regenerative agriculture already?
Yeah, no. Yeah, no. Well, how to start answering this one? Well, on one hand, there's the idea that if we're not doing regenerative agriculture, then hey, are you saying we're being degenerative? Is our agriculture degenerative? What? That's not what I do. You're offending me by saying that we're not doing regenerative agriculture, and that comes up quite a bit, and it's a bit of a conversation block sometimes when you might suggest that there are things that can be done to increase the regenerative nature of this agriculture. So yeah, I think that can be identified there. Just because it's not regenerative agriculture, it doesn't mean that we're saying it's degenerative as such. But we're certainly not, in our agricultural practices in general, we're not socially enhancing and we're not ecologically enhancing. Because if we were, they would be incredibly resilient systems that wouldn't need a lot of inputs.
And our farmers would be thriving themselves on a social level.
Yep. And there wouldn't be as much resonance and energy for this idea, the ideas that we're talking about, because there wouldn't be a need for it. We'd already be there. We wouldn't need to give it a name, would we?
And it wouldn't be so appealing. You just brought up something amazing there, is you can't deny when people start to look, they're really compelled and excited about the possibilities that are presented to them, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would just add that there's no way to know if we're regenerative agriculture or not if we can't define it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what would you say, Jono?
Yeah. So are we already doing regenerative agriculture? I mean, firstly, to say that about any situation, aren't we already doing it, just removes any possibility for progression. It's just defending the status quo. So it doesn't matter whether we're talking about regenerative or anything. When a new idea comes in and someone says, yeah, but we're already, or yeah, but anything, da da da, it just completely stops any progression. And the benefit of that to the individual making the statement is they don't have to change. You know, the responsibility for inquiring into somewhere new is gone, because they, to them, are already doing it. You know, it's a bit like we talk about learning a new skill. You've really got to have the courage to suck at something new. You know, that's how you learn, that's how you discover, you've got to work your way through that. And so what I say to anyone, and Dan, you said it perfectly, you know, if we were already regenerative, we wouldn't have the nitrate levels we do in our drinking water. We wouldn't have the toxic algal blooms appearing on our waterways. We wouldn't have the, you know, increases in nitrogen use upwards of 600% since the 1990s to now. We wouldn't have the rates of suicide and depression we have, which is the highest of any industry in the country. And again, we're not saying that if you're not regenerative, you're bad or wrong. It's nothing like that. We're just interested in dealing with what's so, and we're not going to let uncomfortable discussions stop us from having those discussions. So, you know, for anyone that's listening, that's perhaps stuck in the, well, aren't we already? I would just invite you to look at, is your system really functioning in a self-perpetuating manner? I.e., if you were to stop feeding it with the inputs, would it keep functioning? You know, that's what we're talking about, is building real resilience in these systems. And also Dan said it beautifully around the socioeconomic side of things, that, you know, putting a value on farmers' well-being and their waking up in the morning. You know, what are we actually doing this for? Is it just to tick boxes? I think farmers are getting a bit over that. And so are we already regenerative just by following our best practice management, our best management practice? Sure, I mean, you can say that, but to me, after having done that for 15 years, it got really boring and I got really over it. That's why I was so interested when it became an opportunity for me.
Awesome. Okay, so I think we might be at the last question, which is, where is the science to back up regenerative agriculture?
Okay, so you might be able to tell that so far the discussions on regenerative agriculture are definitely not black and white. And the traditional science model of gathering data and making it replicatable is having to control environments. So most of our science is done in, for instance, on plant physiology and nutrient demands and what plants need to grow healthy, is based upon technology from, you know, the late 19th, early 19th century. And a lot of the information from then is being built upon keeping that simplified system going. So, you know, the NPKS model, growing plants in a monoculture fashion, mostly in sterile environments, monitoring what the plants contain on a nutrient level, what the soil contained on a nutrient level, measuring how much has been removed from that soil, and then saying, okay, that plant needs this much to grow, blah, blah, blah. So that science is really simple, and it doesn't allow for the complexity of an ecosystem. So you throw into the situation high plant diversity, which you'll find in any natural environment. You throw in there, you know, a thriving soil biota, you know, of which a teaspoon of contains more life than humans have ever lived on the planet. You would need to be able to account for all of those different microbes in the soil to get a true replicate or a true science, research piece or data. And the current science technology just doesn't equate for that complexity. But what it really excites me is, firstly, there's been a lot of work done. You look at the Jono experiment, you look at, for instance, even most recently in New Zealand, even Dr. Gwen Grillet and Sam Lang's white paper on research priorities in New Zealand context. Really powerful information in there. You listen to Dr. Jonathan Lundgren of Ecdysis Foundation. There's lots of science out there that's being done in a way that does truly account for the complexity. And in order for the historic scientists to catch up to that level of complexity requires almost a letting go of the way that things have been done, the status quo as far as data collection. And so the answer to where is the science to back it up? Well, there's plenty of information in science relevant right now. And I'm really excited about the stuff to come that captures the massive complexity of these situations, which, we'll never really get to the bottom of it all. We know more about space than we do soil, but it really gets me fizzed up thinking about, discovering more, all the time, and changing our science to suit.
Yeah, man, you said it really well. The science is there, and I would say, like, a lot of the science is not where you'd usually look. To back up regenerative agriculture, a lot of the science is in ecology. It's in even social science. And a lot of the traditional agricultural science is quite, it divides things. So it will take one species of grass and controlled trial to try and determine what is the cause of something. So yeah, there is a lot of science there, and there's more exciting science coming up in regenerative agriculture. What I think sometimes gets in the way is the idea that science must come before action. And there is more sources of the truth than science. Science itself, peer-reviewed articles are not the number one source of truth that you should be following to inform your practices on farm. What I believe is that the farmer knows a lot more about that ecosystem than what they realize, and they know a lot more about that ecosystem than the science does, because the science is very generalized for any environment, but the farmer knows that specific environment, and that's going to become more and more important as you move into regenerative agriculture. Is what's your specific context, and doing your own science is so exciting for me. Is enabling farmers to do their own science, their own research, get into the soil and measure things their own way in real time. So the science is coming.
Dude. Yeah. And reconnecting farmers to their own ability to be able to observe their farm operation. It's to be able to tell farmers how to run their farm from a lab. There might be some validity in that in some certain situations, but I think the key thing you communicated there so well was allowing farmers to trust their instincts. And although something they observe might not be, readily available in the form of a peer-reviewed paper, doesn't discredit the observation, does it? And the eyes don't lie. The nose doesn't lie.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we created living systems, and even, something probably super relevant to the discussion right now is the the living systems land health mapping software that you've been developing, Dan, where farmers can, benchmark and monitor their own farm and land health trends and have it stored in a way that's, it's beyond citizen science. It's completely context specific, site specific data that farmers can use to make decisions from.
Yeah. Yep. And it's visible. I think that's really key for me, is that a lot of this learning can take place on the farm. You can get into the soil and really take some measurements and the water infiltration and how many worms and how much structure there is in the soil and what you're seeing in terms of insects and different species, weeds, volunteer plant species popping up, that they tell you a story that you can learn a lot from. But the ability to show that to another person in a way that is really clear is what I'm trying to develop with you and the living systems land health mapping, because that becomes very visible. And you can see, you can log where you took that measurement, and an image, you can take a photo of what you're trying to show, and put in data, different specific headings of data, and then that can be stored. And that can be really powerful when you're trying to communicate your farm story with others. And importantly, with the amount of regulation that's being excuse me, is coming in and being changed as we speak, being written, it's important to tell the story of the farm and really how the practices that you're doing are moving towards more ecological function and ecologically and socially enhancing, because that really needs to be acknowledged. And it's not easy to communicate. So if there's something that we can do to help communicate that, then it would be amazing.
Yeah. We're already doing it, man. For those of you that don't know, Dan is really clever with technology and software, and has been developing a lot of really cool mapping technology around farm planning and different policies for meeting different requirements, and with also a background in ecology and passion for regenerative agriculture and soil health. And then since we met, I've seen massive opportunity for taking the information that I would gather when I'm on farm with my clients, and somehow taking that and capturing it at a glance in a way that's quantifiable, but then relaying that into the software that Dan's created so that farmers can look at a glance on their mapping software, paddocks, their progression and trending and their soil health and biodiversity tests that are performed by the farmer after some basic training, which we will provide. I think it's going to be a massively powerful tool, not just for meeting regulation powerfully and for making decisions on, different areas of priority on the farm regarding soil health and function, but also just day-to-day management of tasks and staff as well. I think it's, to me, it puts a smile on my face because it's an area that's been of interest to me for some time, but not had the skills in that area. And then all of a sudden, Dan and I meet and these possibilities blow up. So I think you might be able to tell that Dan and I are both equally pretty excited about that, and you can look forward to seeing more on this. And I just want to take the moment to thank all of you that have joined us and watched this video, and also invite you to check out livingsystems.nz. That's how you can join the Living Systems Network. There's a couple of questions that we've created just to aid in our. Why don't you talk about the process, Dan, of how to join?
Okay. You go to livingsystems.nz, you'll be taken to a landing page. It'll tell you a little bit about what Living Systems is, And if you click on register or ask to register, you'll be taken through 3 questions, and just real simple questions to help you understand what the intention of the platform is, because it's not an open platform. As you said earlier, it's a secure network, a mycelial network, to share knowledge and nutrients for the improvement of land care. So you'll be taken through 3 questions, and then you get approved to come into the community, and you can either download the app or just use the web platform. It's quite a versatile system, and you would just really encourage engagement with it. You can set up a profile, you can follow different topics, you can look at the branches. The branches are kind of like groups. They're either local groups that can be actually groups that you're currently in, and now you can create a virtual way to communicate and set up events, or they can be just interest branches. So a certain interests. What's an example of an interest branch, Jono?
If you're interested in ruminants and grazing management, you might go to a certain branch, or ecology. We are just sort of, what Dan and I said was we would really rely on the community to let us know the direction it would like to head. And for us, Living Systems is not about Dan and I. Living Systems is about the community and its members. And so as we see topics being discussed, we would then adapt our branches of discussion points and topics to suit just where those discussions were heading. The cool thing about Living Systems is it's not specifically agriculture based, although soil health is the key. We're also interested in, the human element. We get right down into, educating youth and children. Dan and I will be providing some courses for youth to take part in. What other courses are we going to offer, Dan? We're going to be doing some stuff around the soil health mapping as well.
Yep. Yeah, about talking a little bit more about the environmental regulations and implications of that. It's quite complex. So how does regenerative agriculture fit with regulations and just in general what's coming up? So the other thing that you can do, and it's related to courses, is set up events. And so there's a calendar within the Living Systems platform where we'll be putting up links to events concerning regenerative agriculture from all over the place and putting it into the calendar there. And in addition, you can create a new event and even invite people from within the Living Systems network or specific to a branch. So, for example, the local group that I'm in, I've set up a event recurring every month, the first Wednesday of the month, and that can sit there as a calendar just for that group or branch.
Fantastic. So it really caters to everyone at all levels, any groups. It just sounds to me like just a great platform that's secure, free of algorithms and advertisement. There's really nothing to be, the whole thing Dan and I wanted to create was the space and security to share authentically. So, the good, the bad, the ugly, get everything out there, and it is safe, it is secure, and not only do you get a whole lot from sharing in that way, such that others really get, the authenticity behind your sharing, it also creates that space for others to feel okay about sharing with what they're dealing with, whether they might think it's, not quite of a level of, importance that they might view to be required to share. It's really just about sharing whatever's there. And we really, want to communicate that clearly, is that there really is nothing, no area that we can't discuss. And whatever you discuss is valid within this group. We really wanted to stress that, as long as, we aren't trying to convince anyone or trying to be, really righteous about any particular subject, as long as it's just straight, authentic sharing about your experiences, there's no harm done, regardless of the topic. So if you want to know more, check out livingsystems.nz. You can look forward to Dan and I producing more content as our relationship develops and takes off. And in the meantime, get on there, get engaged, get sharing, get learning. And we really hope it's, going to be of massive importance, or not importance. What's the word I'm looking for? What can we leave the people with, Dan?
We really hope it's going to be of massive benefit.
That's the word, importance. Come on here. We really hope that what we're doing will make a difference in your life with Living Systems. So go ahead and check it out.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers. Awesome, man.